guys, this is Faith Jones from Providence Quilt. Today we're going to walk through foundation paper piecing the templates on the Providence Quilt block for the Summer Sampler Series 2021. This is our last 12-inch block of the quilt along, and we've saved the foundation paper piecing process for last. This will be a new technique for some of you, and this will be an old favorite for others. The first thing you want to do is print your templates out at 100% or actual size. Once you've printed them out, you want to take your quilting ruler and you want to check the scale icon and make sure that it's 1 inch. Some people, a very small handful of people, will already have a problem at this stage. Depending on how you're printing the document, or your printer's drivers, you may have to rescale how you're printing. Actual size or 100% might not work for you. Usually there's a very small handful of people that for some reason the way their printer works or their printer driver pairs with either their browser or Adobe or Preview or whatever they're using to open the PDF, they need to change their scaling when they print to something like 103% or 98%. So definitely find that sweet spot for you. The other problem we see sometimes is people trying to print these templates from an iPhone or an iPad and the scale not working. So if you're having that problem, get to a computer and print from there. If you don't have a computer at home, you can do it from your public library or somewhere like FedEx or Kinko's, Office Depot, Staples, something like that. So once you know that your scale is correct, you're going to take your scissors and you're going to cut out around this dotted line. So here's template A all cut out, and the next thing I want to do is grab the fabric that I cut out for this template. So I've pre-cut everything, and I like to lay the fabric out on the template just to see how it looks. This is an easy way to see, do I like my layout, do I like the fabrics I've chosen, or do I want to change my mind before I get started? So the square goes into 1A here, and it looks like according to the pattern, I'm going to put the white on 3A and 4A. So I'm just going to lay those over those spots. I'm going to put this light pink on those areas and then the dark coral color in the corners. And yeah, I really do like how this looks, so I'm going to get started with my paper piecing. So when you foundation paper piece, it can be a little confusing. What you're doing is you're actually sewing on these lines and you're placing your fabric on this unprinted side. You can see how that might be a little confusing, like how do I know where I'm putting it? When you're placing your fabric, I like to hold my template up to a window or some sort of light pad. Totally not necessary, but if you have one for another craft, you can always do that. But I like to hold it up to the light, and I have a light right here that I can see through the fabric in the template here. And you're going to place your first piece of fabric for 1A on the unprinted side, and you want to make sure that you have at least 1/4 inch of your fabric overhanging outside all of the 1A lines. That is going to be your seam allowance. You can either glue this in place or pin it in place, or if you're experienced, you can just hold it in place if you've done this before. I am going to just get some glue and glue it to place. These are really great glue sticks. I don't know if you've ever used these, Sewline. I bought them for English paper piecing, and you can see it's pretty used, but I find them pretty handy. I've been using them lately to hem some of my kids' clothes that are knits. I fold down where I want to hem and I kind of glue it into place because I'm awful at sewing with knits. So I'm just going to put, a little glue there and hold that into place. Next, you want to take your piece of fabric for 2A, which according to my pattern is this. So you're going to flip this over. We know for 2A It's right here. And we know when it's done sewing, we want it to look like that. So you flip them right sides together. You turn it over, hold it up to the light. You kind of see here the shadow. And you make sure that you're at least 1/4 of an inch over this overhang. So when we sew it, it's going to open up like that. So if you want, you can pin that into place or glue it or just hold it. But what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we are going to sew along this line. And when you sew along that line, I'm going to mark it. You want to go a little past the line in both directions. So probably start down here and I'll just sew off the paper up here. And that's going to hold it into place for the seam allowance. I'll be back. Okay, I am back. As you can see, I have sewn from here all the way to here. I forgot to mention, but it is mentioned in the pattern, when you foundation paper piece, when you sew, you need to shorten your stitch length. I use about a 1.4. That's going to make it easier to perforate and tear off this paper after you're done sewing without ripping out your stitches. This is what it looks on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over to my pressing station and I'm going to press this open like this. Here I am all pressed. Now I'm going to do the same thing with 3A. So 3A is up here and it is a white piece of fabric. So I'm going to do the same thing I did here. I'm going to take, I don't know if you can tell, but I tried to get a white piece of fabric with print on it. I'm going to put it right sides together. Now this square is a little oversized, so I could even scoot it down a bit and still have a 1/4 inch overhang. Just hold it up to the light and I can see I have a shadow. This looks about right. So I'm going to sew on this line. Again, I'm going to go over a little out of the line for the seam allowance. So I'm going to go probably just off the paper on both sides like that. And I'll be back. Okay, I am back and this is what it looks like on the unprinted side right now, which is the front of the block. And this is what it looks like on the printed side, which is the back of the block. And I just sewed across the whole line. And as you can see, it's looking a little, kind of a little messy over here. That's okay. But if I opened this up, because I scooted my piece down a little, you can see the red through the block. And that's not super attractive. You're not going to want that in your finished quilt. So what you do at this point, if you ever have that happen, is you can push the paper down where you had stitched, because you don't want to cut that, and just trim away a 1/4 inch away from your stitch line, just to clean it up a bit. Fold it back. Okay. Ta-da. Can't see anything through it now. And I'm going to go press that. Okay. It's pressed. Just going to do the same thing on this side now. I'm going to take the fabric for piece, oops, I guess we're down here. I'm going to take the 4A fabric. Same thing. Right sides together. Make sure, yep, that's going to look right. Hold it up to the light. Make sure you have the overhang, the 1/4 inch overhang. Yep. Scoot it down just a tad. And I'm going to go sew on this line, extending a little before and after once again. And extend into that red a bit. And I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. And this is what the block looks like now on the front and on the back. Sometimes I just like to trim away some of these threads because they distract me. You can see I have this little red showing, so I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to I'm gonna fold the paper back and I'm gonna trim about a quarter inch from this stitch line. Okay. For the final side of the initial ring around the square, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to place these right sides together, hold it up on this side to the light, make sure I have the overhang into that section at about a quarter inch. And I do, I can see it there. I'm going to go sew, keeping in mind to sew a little before and after to secure it. I'll be right back. Here's what your block should look like now, front and back, and you can see I stitched a little before and after to secure it. I'm going to fold the fabric or the paper back here, do some trimming. Now I'm going to go press it. Okay, so we have our first ring around the square for our Providence block. We have these two pieces left that we are going to foundation paper piece to here. So it looks like this is 6A. Really doesn't matter which order you do them in, but we'll follow the pattern. And I know this is going to be around here because the point is going to line up to here. We're going to end up sewing and our stitch line is going to go through this intersection. So that helps me kind of guide where I want to put the fabric. But then I'm going to double check by, again, holding it up to the light and making sure I can see the shadow of this fabric about a quarter inch past, at least a quarter inch past the line I'm going to be stitching on. You can pin it into place or hold it, but I'm going to go stitch this and I'll be right back. Okay, here we are with our unit. You can see I have some fabric overhang here that's a little sloppy again, so I'm going to trim that off. And let's see, I'm going to go press this open. Okay, once it's pressed, you can kind of start to see the beauty of foundation paper piecing. It hasn't been that hard so far. And you can see we have a perfect point here where these meet. And that is because we're just sewing on these lines that have a perfect shape. So this is one of the reasons I love this technique and I'll use it for all sorts of things, is just everything looks exact. You look like such an expert when you do this. So for our final piece, we're going to do the same thing here. I'm going to line it up. I know that these need to be aligned just for the design. Helps. I know we're going to be sewing where we're going to get this point. I'm going to hold it up. Yep, that's about a quarter inch past the line for the seam allowance. So I'm going to just sew across this whole area now. Okay, we're back. Sewed on the line, so you can see here. I'm going to do the same thing where I fold the paper back. Sometimes you just need to like pull the fabric off the paper a little to be able to fold this back as you get more fabric on here. It's okay. Trim it there. And now I'm going to go press this. Okay, here's what our unit looks like. Probably thinking, well, that's pretty sloppy around the edges. So now we're going to trim it. For this, you want the paper side up. And this is why you cut on the outside dashed lines, because that is where we are going to trim it, and that will be the seam allowance when you put your units together. So I just got this new ruler, Creative Grids, and I'm not sure if you can tell, it has this frosted edge here for quarter inch trimming. And then it even has a frosted edge here for if you were trimming at 1/2 inch. So I think that's kind of neat. I'm gonna try it out today. What you wanna do is you wanna line up your 1/4 inch to your solid line here. So I always measure off that line just in case I didn't trim properly or I was a little sloppy when I'm trimming. That happens all the time. So you wanna line up a 1/4 inch past the solid line. So I have my 1/4 inch line on the solid line. The end of the ruler is 1/4 inch past that. And that is where I'm gonna trim. And that way I know I am exactly a 1/4 inch out. Even if you can see here, when I was cutting out my template, I wasn't perfect. That's fine. So putting the 1/4 inch marking on the ruler on the solid line, cutting, sorry about that. And I'm gonna just go around the whole block, do the same thing. Okay, now you have your block all trimmed up, and when you flip it over, you'll see, this is why I love foundation paper piecing. It is so perfect. Your lines are perfect, your corners meet up perfectly. It makes you look like you're in expert mode, even if this is the first time you've ever done this. So, love this technique. Now you can decide, when do I tear off the paper? It's personal preference. Sometimes I tear it off now, sometimes I wait till I assemble the block. On simpler units and simpler quilts, I'll tear it off immediately because I really just do not enjoy tearing the fabric out of the seam allowances. When you sew the units together, you get these little strips of fabric in there. But on this block, there were a lot of units we had to sew together. I really wanted my points to meet nicely, so I waited until afterwards to tear the paper out. Actually, I haven't even torn it out yet, and I'll show you that next, what the back of my finished block looks like. So this is actually what my finished block looks like, and I'm only pulling it over here to show you the back of it. And how you can see, I did leave the paper on the foundation paper pieced components, and it just helped me line up all those little the squares and the points for when I was making my final block. So now that you've made unit A, you're going to make three more of those, and then as you can see, template B, very similar, actually just has less pieces, but you're doing the same thing with the square and then the little triangles around it. You'll have the smaller triangles and then the bigger triangles. And then template C is a lot like template A, but just the first 5 pieces that you sewed on template A. So that will be very easy for you to put together. I hope this video helped you guys, and I'll be sure to pop into the Facebook group this week to answer any questions that you might have when you're making this block, especially for the new foundation paper piecers. Thanks a lot. Bye.